Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Hey, guys, thank you so much for being here. I am your host, Dr. Graham Walker, joined by my friend and much smarter clinical informaticist, Dr. Matt Sakumoto. Matt, you want to tell the audience about yourself?
For sure, and yeah, don't oversell it. So, good evening or morning wherever people are listening in from. So, Matt Sakumoto, virtual primary care physician out in the Bay Area. Also, a huge nerd and love exploring. And I'll be honest, just trying to make my life easier. So that's the selfish thing behind it. That being said, looking forward to learning from I think a lot of people in the chat as well. So AI very important. I think we've all played with the different chat bots. Maybe a little bit on our personal side of life, but then also bring that into how can this make our clinical day, my clinical day, just a little bit easier.
Yeah, we'll try to give you a mixture of tips, live demos, information that can help you use these tools more effectively, so that you're actually using the tools fewer times because you're getting better answers the first time. We'll kick it off with the slides here. I will say that Matt and I are both just finishing a shift. I got called in for sick call, so I'm probably a little frontally disinhibited, as we like to say in the ER. So it's going to be a fun one. So wild ride. Here we go. We've got a surprise guest. Thank you to Evidently for co-hosting with us as well. And let's kick it off here. Very briefly, I just wanted to announce, if you are not a clinician, if you don't have an NPI number, you can now sign up for Offcall to access all of our resources. Previously, we had set things up so that you needed a national provider identification number, and we just changed that. And Jake, my co-founder for Offcall, is going to be putting an AI education Google form survey in the comments in LinkedIn. So please take a look at that and let us know what you want. What's the next topic that we can do one of these webinars for you? We're trying to do them monthly. They are only growing and growing and growing because I think the interest is really there for AI education. People want and understand these tools are really powerful, but want to figure out how to use them safely and accurately. We know you're all busy. It is 5 p.m. here. It is 8 p.m. if you're on the East Coast, or if you're in other parts of the world, maybe it's 2 a.m. Or you're watching tomorrow. Just thank you for being here and watching, and hopefully us learning from you as well. Just a shout out here. Put your best ideas for how you're using prompting in the chat. It could be clinical ways that you're using generative AI. It could be non-clinical stuff. We're going to collect the best ideas and we will share them in our AI prompting guide that comes out in a few days as well. But let's dive in. Matt, you want to take this one?
For sure. I think this is one of those things where, I guess like most things in medicine, we're all about delayed gratification. So large parts of this is take the time to kind of hone the skills. Time spent now hopefully can kind of really build up a arsenal of things that you can use kind of down the line. I think some things, a lot of this, it will be about drafting notes, drafting things and setting things up there. So again, hopefully 15 minutes here will save hours down the line. I think that's true for a lot of things. And so we're here to practice skills, and like I said, as I've said before, we're here to learn, I think, from you as well. So thank you all in advance.
Yeah, the more time that these tools are getting better, and so it's not that prompting is not important. The tools are getting a little bit smarter at understanding what you actually intend, what you want. But if you even take the 5 seconds to make your prompt 2 sentences instead of 1 sentence, you're going to get a better answer immediately, as opposed to a longer kind of verbal diarrhea answer that is way too long, and you're actually spending more time reading through all the text itself. I came up with this analogy with the help of ChatGPT. I will, specifically for this lecture, LLMs, generative AI, needs specificity and explicit instructions. Now, I could say to Matt and I could be discussing a case, and I could say, yeah, I'd probably give that person antibiotics. To me, because Matt's a colleague, Matt would understand, oh, well, Graham is agreeing with the concept of giving antibiotics, but Graham is not just saying any antibiotic. Matt is another clinician. Matt's going to have to figure out what antibiotic to give. In the same way, it would not be appropriate for me to just tell the pharmacist or the nurse, hey, yeah, give them some antibiotics, because that is not explicit enough to get the outcome that I want. you write a SIG so that you get specifically what you want for your patient. You write the med, the dose, the route, the frequency, and the indication, because you know if you just said, yeah, give them some antibiotics, you're not going to necessarily get the thing that you want. And that is the exact same thing with large language models. The more information you give it, the more specificity, the more context, the better the answers you're going to get.
And this is sort of, we'll talk through a little bit deeper dive on like the anatomy of what a large language model is, but it really just is next word predictor. So if anyone has ever Googled anything, or you kind of have something working in the background of your email that predicts the next word, that's basically what that is on steroids. So it's all just about probabilities, and we'll walk you through some of the math behind that as well.
You know, a quick shout out. We're now at 100 people, and shout out to Ishma Chaudhry, still working a shift, but taking a lunch break and not missing this. Thank you for being here. It is recorded. If you need to go off and do patient care, please go do patient care. Matt, Matt like literally has the best analogies for how to make sense of things. Matt, do you want to explain this analogy that you came up with?
Sure thing. Actually, let me. Oh,
Matt's
and Graham,
yeah.
can you still hear me?
Let's see. Yeah. I can still hear you.
It's not a talk unless there's a technical difficulty. Which slide is showing now? I'm still on the LLM.
Sorry, Matt. It's the LLM anatomy.
Oh, perfect. Hold on, I'm still.
While Matt works on his technical difficulties, I will still fully give him credit for this idea. If you've heard of LLM tokens, a token is similar but not totally equal to a word. But tokens are the chunks or the parts of words that make up a large language model. And so in the sentence "Hello World," that is 3 tokens, and each of the tokens, the words "Hello World" and the exclamation point, are all given different weights and different priorities because they tend to go along in human text speech patterns in different orders. Matt, here I'll have you take the. I did the anatomy, you do the physiology.
Sounds good, and I'm back. So physiology is, again, response to external prompts, right? So I always had a large difficulty with endocrine just because I feel like the loops kind of looped back on each other. But that's a large part of learning and working with large language prompts. So prompts are like your external stimuli. So that's what you're prompting the large language model to do. You're giving directions, and there's a cascade of things that happen underneath. The better you understand how those cascades work, the better prompts you can give. So that's sort of the analogy that we're working with here. And then, yeah, the outputs are the hormones released. What you see on the outside after it kind of goes through this set of loops is what you want to do. So that's what you're doing. You're balancing those input prompts with getting the output you want, because you don't want too much thyroid hormone. You don't want too little thyroid hormone. You kind of want just enough. And learning how those feedback loops happen and what levers to push is a skill and things that we'll work through today.
The other topic that you may hear about is temperature, and temperature is not fever. It is a setting that if you go into a large language model settings, you can control the temperature. You can dial it up or down. And a low temperature, meaning things are kind of cold. There's not a lot of Brownian motion in the liquid. Things are really straightforward. Things are really low risk tolerance, very dry, very rote, not very creative or exciting. And if you turn up the temperature all the way, things are way more creative, but also way more chaotic. Now, if you're using Claude or ChatGPT, they are handling the temperature for you. They are controlling the temperature. It's one of the settings you use, because this is just software. It's just like a setting you can configure. And I've got 2 examples here of temperature with the exact same prompt. So on the left, low temperature, you can see I ask it, tell me a creative joke, and it says a creative joke. Why did the bicycle refuse to stand up by itself? Because it was too tired of the same old routine. That's not even funny. It's a pretty boring joke. Now that was the temperature equals 0. That's as low as it can get. I set the temperature to high and asked the exact same question to ChatGPT. Tell me a creative joke, and you can see it starts out, sure. Why did the password go ever password outer gekken, and then there's like some Sanskrit and Thai and other languages here. So a perfect example of if you you can imagine that's a really creative answer, but it is unintelligible to humans, and it looks like total gobbledygook. So that is one of the things you can control. Obviously, in medicine, we're probably going to be on the lower temperature side because we don't tend to want a ton of creativity, a ton of psychosis. We want something that's fairly well controlled and honestly kind of boring because that's going to be safer and less creative. Okay, let's move on to the next slide here. Matt, I loved your Google example. Explain that a little bit to the audience.
Yep. And the things that if you remember nothing else with this talk, it's kind of a mnemonic that I use is GPT. So G stands for not Google. P is for prompting, which is what we're working on here. And T is for task-oriented things. And I think that's kind of what these things are generally best used for, or picking the right tool for the right task. But for the not Googling, and Graham and I were prepping for this, both me and my parents own smartphones with access to the internet. But I am definitely a digital native, and they'll ask me things that they could just as easily Google themselves. The difference there is I've kind of tuned myself to be like, okay, less is more. SEO on Google, I don't want to add too many things because then I'm going to get a lot of extra results that I don't want. So we've kind of taught ourselves that in a search bar, like less is more. It's the exact opposite when you're typing into a prompting window. So more is more for these, being specific, giving extra directions, giving extra examples actually gets you a better output. Again, going back to our inputs and outputs physiology analogy. So I think from that standpoint, and we'll show you specific examples on those. But yeah, throw your old Google search skills out the window, then it's flexing a new muscle.
Yeah, you might be really good at typing, monoarticular arthritis differential DX, and then you get exactly what you want from Google. That is the wrong way to do it for prompting. You want to give the tool as much information as you can to get a better answer back, a more customized answer as well. The last thing I'll say before we totally jump into examples here is just privacy, PHI, HIPAA. We don't want anyone to get in trouble here. We're going to show you a bunch of examples of how Gen AI can work in medicine. These are all made up patients. None of this is real data, of course. And then I'll just say, unless you have been like, you've signed an agreement with somebody, or your information officer says, yeah, you are approved to use this tool, please do not put PHI into ChatGPT or Claude. These tools vacuum up data. They are learning how to become better by using your data, and there is not a way to go in and say, oops, I sent in the patient's medical record number. It is gone into the ether forever. You cannot get it back. Even if you delete the chat, the information's already been stored. There have been companies that have already gotten in trouble for this outside of the medical space. So please use these tools responsibly, because we obviously don't want anybody to get in trouble. And I think this will also get worked out over time as the health systems understand the value of these tools, and they'll find ways to make these accessible to people more frequently, so you don't have to be as cautious with PHI. Okay, we're going to go into some prompt variants. Matt, explain what you did here for just a garden variety prompt here.
Yeah. And I think one other thing that I'll highlight is that the superpower of these GPTs, the actual T stands for transformer. So what it can do is take a body of text and shape it and transform it in different ways. So what I did here, I had a fake patient, but a transcript of a doctor-patient conversation about chest pain. I think the one that we've seen and have thought about and experienced ourselves. But from that transcript, I told it to 1, make an assessment and plan, 2, make patient instructions, and 3, write a prior auth letter. So 1, I don't have to do all those 3 things, but also, again, this is the power of what a transformer can do. I gave it a admittedly weak prompt and said, just try these 3 things. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show what it kicked out. So progress note, not bad. So, and again, this was literally just that prompt, no tuning or anything. So, chest pain, unstable angina, throws a ICD-9 code on there, has some of the info about the 50-year-old male, diabetes, 3-day history, episodic substernal chest pressure. So it kind of took the patient speak and turned it into more doctor speak as you go down there. Plan is set up there, EKG in office, other things like that. Turned it, and then additionally, step number 2 was like write some patient instructions for Jack. So important chest pain things, what we found today, tests that we're doing, very important, ED precautions essentially. Meds
they love those ED precautions in primary care.
I also love follow up with PCP, so it cuts both ways. Follow-ups to do, questions there, and then the prior authorization request. So clinical info, presenting symptoms, high-risk features. This will still probably get kicked back by the insurance bot on their side, but at least it's a good first try. So again, this was basically with that very short,
like
prompt,
really simple prompts. The prompts down here that included, create 3 things: make an assessment plan section of a progress note, make some patient instructions, make a prior auth letter based on this conversation, this fake patient conversation that Matt sent over to the large language model. But we can do better, Matt.
We can always do better. So like I said, good, not great. And then we'll show kind of the power and the importance of, by taking a little bit of extra time, specifying what I want for each of those 3 outputs, what does that look like, and how can we make that better?
Yeah. So this is the one prompting framework that I like the best because it's kind of simple and short and straightforward. There are honestly probably 20 of these different mnemonics for prompting frameworks. They all kind of do the same thing. This one's called RTF, role task format. I mean, honestly, it's not that far off from like an SBAR kind of concept if you want to stick to something you know from healthcare already. But the idea here is role, task, and format. So you want to tell the model, hey, what role do you want it to play? Do you want it to take the role of a urologist? Do you want to take the role of a politician, William Shakespeare? Like you can have these tools pretend to be any other person or any other role. And then what's the task? Like Matt said, is the task to write a song, write a poem, write a prior authorization letter, write a prescription. And then what's the format you want? Again, you're trying to give the tool more data and more specificity about what you're looking for. So, format the output as like bullet points, or you prefer prose, or you prefer limericks. These tools can really do any of those quite easily. And then you can additionally add additional options, like give it some additional context. So that might be, your one-liner about the patient, or the entire patient note, or the patient conversation like Matt just did. What are the constraints? Is this is this a consult note that I'm going to be sending back to my colleague? And so it should be written at a medically professional level, or is this something that is patient instructions that needs to be at a 5th grade reading level? And then finally, like, what's the tone or the style? Should it be extremely academic and professional if you're, submitting your CV to apply to, Harvard, or should it be more approachable and friendly, or really short and to the point, or no longer than 2 sentences? Anything like that, you're going to get better information out because you've invested in giving it better information up front. Okay, so Matt, you want to walk through these examples using RTF?
Yep. So rather than just saying like, write me an assessment and plan, which is literally what I wrote for the initial prompt, it's now the role. So you're an experienced primary care physician documenting a patient encounter. And again, you can switch that for your context or anything like that. Task, so a comprehensive assessment and plan, and then make a progress note based on this encounter. And then that's where you drop in an entire transcript. And then the format, again, being more specific. So standard medical documentation, ICD-10, not ICD, or ICD-10 instead of ICD-9. Specific clinical reasoning, evidence-based action items. So how do you kind of really beef up the note? And this is what the output was.
So the original on the left, the new one on the right, right?
Yeah. So looking at the two, a lot of similarities between the two, which makes sense. But updating even down to the ICD-10 codes. And I actually looked this up. I cross-checked these, and both of them are actually correct. That's the old ICD-9. This is the correct ICD-10. And again, that goes back to also trust but verify things that come out. Always double check the work. But then there's a higher emphasis on the high risk and complexity of this patient, and helpful for billing, but also just for conveying the level of importance and urgency here. And then more of greater focus on professional medical language, kind of looking between the two, adds more, again, medical jargon, because this is specifically for written documentation in the note itself.
Yeah, the more adjectives you use, comprehensive, extensive, thoughtful, like using those adjectives actually will fundamentally change the responses you get. People refer to this as like you're doing software development, or you're programming or coding just with the English language. And so if you just say, yeah, give me a differential for chest pain, you're going to get a very different answer than if you say, acting as an expert emergency physician, provide a comprehensive differential diagnosis in the order of decreasing likelihood or something like that as well. If you guys have other prompting formats or frameworks you like, feel free to put them in the comments and share with other people as well. We do have a question here, Matt. Do you have a preference for which LLM to use this for medical application? Claude Sonnet, GPT-5, Google Gemini has a 2.5 Pro and a 2.5 Flash, as well as some open source models called MedGemma as well. Matt, do you have a preference?
I mean, from my standpoint, not really. To be honest, I bounce back and forth between like what I'm able to personally access versus like, and for good reason, like a lot of the work computers are a lot more locked down. So it's mostly what I can get my hands on. I think a lot of these, for the level, I'll be honest, for the level of work that I'm doing, there isn't one specific tool to rule them all, I think, and they're changing so quickly as well. So I think from my standpoint, it's one, I don't have a specific one that I jump into, and then two, at least for the stuff that I'm doing, they tend to work pretty much. I haven't seen one like be superior to the other. I don't know, Graham, have you?
I've been I pay for, this is not sponsored, I pay for GPT Plus, not Pro, Plus, the $20 one. And I've been using that for a long time. And I really like its memory feature because it kind of, this is weird to say, it kind of knows me, and it knows things about me. Like I write on LinkedIn, and I, created these companies, and I work, I'm an emergency physician, all this other stuff. And it will then customize its responses because it knows those things about me. Now, behind the scenes, OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT, has another prompt. It's called the system prompt. It's kind of a layer above what you and me, the user, can access. And it too has a specific prompt that's saying, hey, you're talking with a user named Graham. He prefers to be called whatever, Dr. Walker. I don't actually do that with ChatGPT, but you can. You could make it call you whatever you want. But I will say I've been moving a little bit more towards Claude because I haven't totally been in love with the GPT-5 models as much. I've been using Claude more. I agree with you, Matt. There's not really a right answer. The Google models are, I'm starting to like even more. They're extremely fast, and they're like, a lot of their responses are really good. So definitely don't count Google out. And then the last thing I'll say is, just like Matt said, I mean, every 2 weeks there's some new announcement. And so I don't think it's worth your time or effort to try to say, oh, well, this one is now better, and so I should switch to that one. They're all extremely good. They all still have problems as well, but they're all extremely good in medicine. And I haven't seen one that's particularly better. Google does have some MedGemma models that are specific to medicine, but I haven't seen those really take off and say that they're better than the truly kind of behemoth models that people are using today.
I guess one other thing, there's a lot of large language models that will say we are better for medicine. A lot of times that means like we plug into PubMed. I'll be honest, the level of medicine that I practice like does not rely on like PubMed level published things. So it's probably better for researchers maybe, but I'd say like for practicing medicine, I'm I'm still skimming the surface from that standpoint. So like that level of
Yeah.
tuning doesn't make a difference, at least for me in a day-to-day primary care practice.
Yeah. We got a comment from Austin, John Fordham. Hey, Austin. Austin talks about newer AI tools maybe also already include that prompt to make it easier so that, you know, if you enter that you're an emergency physician in the United States and you've practiced for whatever many years, it may take that information and then tuck that back into its own prompt so that you're kind of automatically getting better information back as well. Okay. Let's move to the next. Oh, I love this. I saw Asad Ali mentioned zero shot prompting. Matt, let's talk about some of the other prompting tools. I'm using these more and more along with RTF to help. Like it feels like they kind of exponentially make me better. You want to cover chain of thought?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's show your work. The other analogy I think that we use is kind of like the large language model is like a unreliable intern. So it's one of those things where you get an answer, you ask a question, you get an answer. Sometimes it's plausible, other times you're like, walk me through your thought process. So that's basically what this is. It's kind of show me your reasoning. These are helpful for, you know, if you're asking for differential diagnosis. Why did you put this one first? So having it basically explain your thoughts. Downside is it does take a lot longer. So the responses are longer because it's having to kind of unroll and unspool those. But that's a good way to kind of look under the hood a little bit and kind of get a sense of, is it hallucinating or do you agree with it from a, you know, from a medical perspective?
Yeah, it lets you see a little bit into the black box. And you know, if you're trying to say, well, why is it saying acalculous cholecystitis or something like that? You can force it to explain itself. Now, unfortunately, because these tools are just trying to please you and make you happy, it may come up with some reason that doesn't make any sense to you. But again, that's why you have medical training, that you can understand like, oh yeah, that literally makes no sense for acalculous cholecystitis. I'm not really going to continue to listen to this model or trust it for this particular prompt. Negative prompting allows you to just add in other boundaries. So you could say what you don't want it to do. Hey, don't give me any answers. Don't give me any differential diagnoses that would only be diagnosed by a specialist. Only give me stuff that I could diagnose myself in the ER or in primary care or whatever. And then meta prompting is probably my favorite and the one that I've been using. I'd say maybe almost every day. Is ask the large language model to make a prompt for you. It's really good, and it has no problem like typing out a lot of information for you really quickly. So you could, I saw somebody mention in the comments earlier wanting a prompt for a discharge summary. You could give it your own discharge summary prompt that maybe you've already created yourself, and you're like, this is the best one. And then maybe just ask the model, hey, can you make my prompt better? What's missing? What should I add? What could improve this prompt? And I'm often really surprised at the stuff that I've left out. That, again, because this stuff we're used to talking to humans, you have to be so explicit with these things. The meta prompting I find is really helpful. Matt, are you using that much?
Yeah, I mean, it's like again, as doctors and clinicians, we also love feedback. So that's basically what that is you're getting feedback on what you think is good, but you're kind of iterating basically. So, and I think it's particularly helpful because like there's sort of things where like I have time to kind of go back and forth and like fiddle with what trying out different prompts. If you're leading a team of physician informaticists or clinician informaticists, and you're kind of starting to build out some of these things, having good templates that other people can use quickly without having to iterate, this is also a great way to kind of build a prompt template for future templating as well. So I think it's a good almost educational tool or before dissemination, focusing on that. Cleaning stuff up for folks that don't have our level of wanting to just tinker.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is I often will. I tend to think that the models do better meta prompting for themselves. So I will typically ask Claude to create a Claude prompt, OpenAI to create an OpenAI prompt, because I think they're better trained for themselves. I don't know if that's true, but I will certainly take information from ChatGPT and send it over to Claude, and get like a different perspective. If I'm like writing something and I'm like, yeah, OpenAI is not really getting it, or it's not editing it in the way I want it to, I'll send it to another model, and they often are pretty good at that. Okay, we're going to pivot over to our special guest, and our sponsor, Evidently. Dr. Kai Romero is yet another emergency physician, but we won't hold that against her. And also hospice physician, palliative care, and now head of clinical and customer success at Evidently. Kai, I've been using Evidently and learning about it, and honestly, I've talked with your founders about it since like 2022. The product is really good at ingesting and understanding the medical record. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Evidently?
Yeah. So thanks, Graham. Essentially, Evidently is a clinical data intelligence platform. And really what that means is that we're reading the entirety of the medical record. In this era, I don't have to tell all of you, the entirety of the medical record is essentially more than 1,000 pages on average. And that's for each patient. If you're lucky, you got 15 minutes to ingest all of that, summarize all of that, and then apply it to your clinical decision making. And so what we have done at Evidently is read all of that information, starting from the actual EHR and extending also into the outside records, the HIE, the care everywhere, and really pull in all of that information so that we can surface that for the clinician at the right point in time. I still work clinically doing hospice medicine, and I don't know all about all of you, but every patient we get is an outside patient because it's at the end of their life, right? So I'll be, directed to review their history and physical, and often it's labeled something like the date, with 7 other things that are labeled the date. And so I'm like looking through signed consent after signed consent to kind of finally get to the clinical information I need. And so when I think about kind of what's the utility of AI in healthcare, it's for those types of tasks where it's a big data collection task. I do not need an MD to click on 7 PDFs, unfortunately. And so once we've read and understood all that patient data, we then use our proprietary knowledge graph, which is, you can kind of think of as an AI kind of framework to interpret really all kind of clinical knowledge. So we pull in things like ICD-10 and SNOMED, and then apply that patient data to that knowledge graph. What that means fundamentally is that a concept like CHF, which if you were to type CHF into a standard EHR, it's going to pull in a bunch of mentions of CHF, right? If you type CHF into Evidently, it's going to bring up the concept of CHF. And that's going to include things like a creatinine or a history
BNP.
of hypertension.
What's their
BNP.
echo? Yeah.
That's right. And so it will surround you with the kind of clinical context for that medical issue, so that instead of searching in 100 areas within the EHR, or more importantly, searching through the outside medical records that are even more difficult to kind of get to reality with, you can pull all of that information at the click of a button and have it ready for you to be able to interpret your patient's overall health. It's embedded in the EHR. It's a tab in Epic or Cerner or Athena, whatever you happen to be in, so you don't have to leave. And I'll also say the important piece of this is actually something that people were getting at earlier. It's all contained within a HIPAA secure compliant network. So you're not leaving to go to another location to collect this information. It's all there safely ensconced in the EHR. So you can feel confident about your ability to interrogate the chart, understand it more deeply, but not be kind of like leaving that network in order to be able to understand it.
I mean, you guys are pulling in, data from FHIR and from HIEs and from all of these sources, and then ingesting it and turning it into your knowledge graph so that I could look at I could type in CHF, and then I could see, an outside hospital's BNP from 3 weeks ago and compare it to my hospital's today or something like that. Kai, do you want to
Yeah,
do
and
a do you want to do a demo of
I would love
Evidently?
to. I would love to. And so I will click over now. Sorry, we are
Clicking.
clicking. This is mimic data, so this is not PHI. But this is an example of the landing page for when you open Evidently. I'm not going to actually go into too much detail here, but I'll just say for context, all of these concepts here, someone used the term, I think it was Matt that said trust but verify. Everything here is linkable. If you click on it, it'll bring you to the primary document where we're getting that information from. So you're not just going to see LV diastolic dysfunction. It's actually going to bring you to the echo that mentions that LV diastolic dysfunction. But related to the broader concept of prompting, this is actually a good example. I think it was Austin who said earlier that new tools are doing some of that RTF kind of shaping for you. Our Ask Evidently tool is essentially a way to kind of chat with the chart to learn about what's in there. So we will, you can use a very simple prompt, and I'm going to use this one here that I would like because I'm an ER doc. How many times?
But you're hospice.
I know. It's both. You know how it
It's
goes.
both. Yes.
So it like you're always what is it when the house you're in, you're the yeah. So let's say for right now, I'm an ER doc, so I do care about intubation. This is a complex patient with a cardiac history. An extensive cardiac history. And so I'll say, how many times has this patient been intubated? It reads through the entirety of the medical record and then can give you these for examples. All of these are linked to the medical record. And I think the other thing to note here is that it also will suggest prompts to you, like what were the indications for intubation? Were there any complications? So for people
and
that
those
are more,
like custom, right, Kai? So those are right. Your system is suggesting those things, not just randomly, obviously, but like based on, oh, this person's asking about intubation. Maybe they want more information specific about that topic. They're like helping you come up with prompts.
That's right.
Yeah, if you're in the audience, you could probably even ask Kai to.
You'd have to read out the prompt for me because I can't see the comments. But yes.
Try to stump Evidently. Yeah.
What I will say is that we get to see kind of what prompts people put in, and it's very clear that there's a whole range of how kind of refined and thoughtful the prompts are. Some people will literally just type in hypertension. That's their prompt. So they're using it kind of much more like Google, but because we've got all of the underlying data and infrastructure there, we can actually generate a thoughtful answer, even when they are kind of a very narrow prompt like that. So that's one example of how we use prompting in the app. I want to give one other example. These are all summaries about the patient that are kind of our best guess at what you would want to see to get a kind of broad level overview. But we also have something called a custom AI summary, which does use those same prompting tools. And I'm going to use some examples of what a prompt could look like that kind of follows some of the format that Graham and Matt were talking about. So you're a cardiologist signing out your patient to an overnight covering hospitalist. Create a short structured overview of the info they need to care for her overnight in 5 lines or less with the most relevant information about the care. And I put these guardrails on the reporting because, in fact, this is like a super complicated patient with a very long ICU stay. And so if you don't put the guardrails, the first time I did it, it was like a very, very long answer. But you can see here, you're just getting at the kind of really high level things, code status, recent labs, EKG, what she was admitted for, and her chronic medical issues. One other thing I want to mention related to this is that we actually have a client who realized that what they needed was essentially to pull in from the medical record, from all of the background data, all the information they needed for a new high risk OB referral, which, as those of you who've ever done an OB rotation or are an obstetrician, like the list of like labs you need to cover, the imaging, the et cetera, is very long. So I want to show you the prompt that we used for them. back to the role, you're an excellent, thorough obstetrician. Write a concise but thorough summary. When you don't have data, please state so. That's a really good phrase to put in there instead of, to try and kind of get around the issue of surfacing things that might not be helpful. And then you can see how long this list is. But essentially from this information, they're able to pull in outside medical records to populate this note. This was a thing that previously took them multiple hours. And I should say also, the fact that it took multiple hours didn't mean that it delayed patient referrals by hours. It meant it delayed them by weeks to months, because as you can imagine, like now you have a buildup of 30 patients trying to get high risk OB in a rural area. And each of those people, it kind of stacks and stacks. And so the fact that we were able to do this and give them, a good overview, and as always, never 100%. You can get a lot of the way there. You have to double check and make sure that it's accurate. But it gets them 90% of the way there with a click of a button, so that they can now get those high-risk OB patients slotted into an appointment much earlier in their pregnancy than they would have otherwise. So this was actually one time when I helped create the prompt, and it was very satisfying to see an outcome that actually saved clinicians time, and shortened the amount of time it took for patients to get access to care.
I mean, it's I think for people outside of healthcare, this is like kind of duh stuff. But I mean, you're both laughing because we all know this is true. This is not stuff that's that like, being able to just look and find out how many times the person's been tubed and why they were intubated within 5 seconds is, I mean, so incredibly helpful, especially if you're about to intubate them.
Well, and
I mean, just in 5 seconds versus 5 minutes, that's a long time for somebody that might need to be intubated.
Well, and I think too, as I'll just put on my hospice doctor hat for a second.
Put it on.
It's a nice hat. Okay. The thing that's striking to me is like we get the story, we get the best story we can, right? And it's often a very limited version of the total story, but it's also so limited by the patient's ability to tell it themselves. And so when you have a tool that can actually do this chart biopsy that goes back through the history of who they are, and now they're an obtunded person who's an elder who can't tell you anything about who they are, who they've been in the history of their life, that is powerful. Now you've got a tool that you can really partner with to provide the best possible care to everybody coming in front of you, regardless of their ability to tell their own story. And that is moving to me.
Well, thank you, Kai, for demoing that and showing that. We're going to do a live demo ourselves now. So thank you, Kai. Stick around. Feel free to ask Kai questions, and we'll try to answer them about Evidently as well. So Matt and I are gonna literally try to make some better prompts. Feel free. This is your chance to get a shout out. Feel free to put it in comments here. So Matt has put together a patient case of a patient who is, in his opinion, anxious.
This anyone named Andy.
Yeah. This is a patient who's had lots of several ER visits and several primary care visits for kind of various symptoms that maybe you're somatic, maybe you're not, and is requesting a bunch of tests. And how could an LLM perhaps help with that? So I'm gonna pop open. I'm gonna see if I can close this guy and open Claude here. Shablam! Look at that. So I've loaded. Again, this is not formatted well, but I've loaded this Andy case in here with information that Matt has created. And Matt, maybe we just how should we start, Matt? Should we just try the RTF protocol here? I'm going to zoom in to make this bigger so you guys can see better.
Actually, I mean, I'm actually kind of curious. Let's throw out a quote unquote bad prompt. It's like,
yeah, sure.
What should I say? Andy is anxious. What should I tell him?
Okay.
Then let's see. I'm actually curious to see what we got.
See how it does. Now, again, I'm using my personal account, so it knows Graham. Andy, I need to be straight with you. You don't have a brain tumor. And, I mean, in some ways, Matt, this is like kind of that stuff where it's like stuff you want to tell the patient, but you don't want them to get upset with you. You have health anxiety. It's causing real suffering. Here's what I know. Key messages to hammer home. It's probably the prompting I've set up, which is like be spicy and direct, honestly, probably. Pivot to solutions. See, I told you spicy.
Spicy part.
Don't apologize for not ordering more tests. Don't say, let's just do one more MRI to reassure you. That's medical malpractice disguised as kindness. See, that's why I like my prompt. It's like, oh, damn, Claude. Okay, so now let's.
I think I've learned more about you, Graham, than about
yeah.
I also love.
Shouldn't have used my own account. So let's try. Maybe you don't like that answer at all, and you think it's maybe the spicy part's like offensive. So let's try. So I often start out my prompt with just acting as a blank, just to get the role in there. But then you don't have to say role. Acting as a very compassionate palliative care doctor named Kai.
Yep.
Yep. I don't love how you approached this, and it might make Andy more upset. Your task is to what should the task be?
Lead with empathy.
Lead. Look at that. It's like you did a hospice fellowship or something. Lead with empathy first. And format short quotes I can use whenever needed to show empathy. Bullet points. Okay, so here's the other problem with the challenge with these models. They are, if you've heard of sycophancy, they are sycophantic. Look, it said, "Oh my gosh, Graham, you're right. That could backfire spectacularly. Let's channel my inner Kai."
Huh.
Empathy first quotes. I can see how frightening it is. Your fiance cares about you. I guess Claude has made up that Andy has a fiance now. The key: validate his experience before redirecting him. Okay. Role: you're the patient care coordinator, and Andy needs a cab voucher from the ER. Task: find out his address. So again, you're getting a very different response. It knows some information about Andy, but because we've given it a different role, it's going to have a very different response there.
I think, and Graham, one other thing, if you scroll back up, kind of the different tasks and thinking about how to make things longer or shorter. I think one tip that I'll throw out there is asking it for multiple things, because I think a lot of times it doesn't get it right the first, second, or even fifth time. But if you have it iterate on 10 different quotes or 10 different things, I've found that, particularly if you're kind of in the more discovery hypothesis building phase, that more is more, I guess is something that I'll kind of say. So again, most of them aren't good, but there'll be a couple of gems if you have it. And you can tell it, say, give me 5 examples, give me 10 examples. And that tends to be a lot more fruitful for me.
Therapy. So we'll try Matt's approach here, and I use this one as well. Like, just give me a bunch of examples, and because you use then your clinical judgment to say, I never thought of that, or that's a terrible idea. I'm going to throw that one out the window. So here's some stuff about CBT, exposure response therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I should use that more in the ER. Progressive muscle relaxation, biofeedback, aerobic exercise. Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that you forgot to ask Andy about exercise. And you're like, oh, hey, Andy, are you exercising? What's your sleep hygiene like? We offer a support group, things like that. Any other, let's see if there's any comments in the chat here. Let's see. we've got a Kai, we've got a request from someone in the audience. Do you want to try an evidently prompt?
Sure.
So if you want to share again, someone is asking if you could ask it to provide advanced directives and end-of-life care summary for that patient.
All right.
Your favorite topic.
It is my favorite topic. Please. Had documented DNR status on that date. This patient actually expired after transitioning to comfort measures during an admission for polyarticular septic joints and methicillin-resistant Staph aureus septicemia. Yeah. So I think the part that I appreciate about that as a clinician is like so much of the time you're trying to figure out when something was discussed or where something was discussed or how. And so being able to kind of get to a specific date is really important. This particular patient didn't have, I mean, it's demo data and she didn't have like an extensive conversation, but they can document the change in code status.
Yeah.
I think one other thing that I'll throw out there is kind of thinking about the person I was asking about, like this, which LLM to use, is kind of the sources of the different data as well. How old are they? Is there a lag? How up to date does your information need to be? Right. So if the question about a patient, having clinical data that's directly plugged into that patient in real time is most important. If there are things where you're, again, kind of maybe building patient education material or other things, like having it be 3 months outdated is okay. So I think it's picking and understanding the sources of your data. Again, evidently is nice because that's fully plugged in to the patient context. If you're doing things, again, more in public-facing large language model, understanding where their date cutoffs were, and if that's important or not, I think is also helpful to think about.
Yeah, totally. And I think the kind of broadly, the getting to the like meat of the matter when it comes to the patient's clinical information is like such a task in and of itself. There's many other layers of information that you might want to know kind of broadly about medicine that aren't related to like, what was this person's creatinine on June 19th? But like those pieces of information are also things that we just like waste a ton of time digging around in the EHR to find. And so there's so many layers to kind of trying to understand the complexity of a patient. I think I saw someone also making the point that like, you're never going to fully understand a patient with their medical record. And that is so true. But can you start managing, I always think of this from the ED perspective. Can you do the first 3 steps if the patient can't tell you anything? Because often we're just coming in a vacuum of information.
Yeah, I just had a patient that was completely altered. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I just need to like, do you have any chronic conditions? Do you like, is your heart rate of 80 normal or pathologic? Can I have any kind of
80 is usually normal, Kai.
Yeah, I know. But I'm 80 if you're supposed to be on a beta blocker.
Oh, I was gonna say if you're a peds or something like that.
80 if you're a fetus isn't good, Graham. Come on. I thought you were an ER doc. But I think there's just getting enough context to like make the first few moves. It's really helpful.
Yeah. Shout out to Jacob Matthew for sharing a bunch of prompts in the chat. Thank you, Jacob. And then let's switch back to my last slide here. Matt and I came up with some kind of non-obvious kind of peri-clinical ways that I think you can also use large language models really successfully. I think it's really helpful for difficult conversations that you're either anticipating, they're coming up. Maybe you see the patients on your schedule tomorrow, or you had one that didn't go well. You can ask these tools to play one of the roles and help you like figure out what you could have said differently or done better. Kind of like what we did with Andy, but you could have it play the role of the patient. You can play the patient. So you can just say what the patient said to you, and you can have Claude play you. And then I certainly have had times where I'm like, Oh God, I wish I had said it that way. This was a really helpful conversation. Matt and I have a colleague, shout out Nathan, who has used ChatGPT to create smart phrases for Epic or Cerner or Athena, whatever your kind of templated tools that you can use with your EHR, to make it really easy to handle a syncope patient in the ER, or somebody with croup in pediatrics or the ER, something like that.
And then, yeah, looking at the other ones, I think someone even mentioned that they use it for board prep, and I think this is actually I've seen this, at all levels, med student through resident through fellows, it just as practice. And again, a lot of these do pull from existing medical information. I think this is actually one where to make sure that you know what your sources are and how old is the data it's pulling from. So I think that's like one thing. Again, trust but verify, right? But I think I remember as a med student, we used to write questions for each other. Like, this is now you can prep and have your large language model write questions for you.
For the next one, differential diagnosis generation, I really think, like Matt said, trust but verify. You really should think of these tools as hypothesis generating tools, in the same way that you wouldn't see a case report of 3 patients who got Motrin and it cured their cancer. You would not start recommending Motrin as the sole cure to your patient's cancer as well. So think of these as like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about Wernicke's encephalopathy. Entertain the ideas that these tools give you. They can be kind of creative and see patterns that you may have missed, but please don't rely on them or think that they know better than you. They probably don't. I don't care how many of the New York Times and Washington Post articles you've seen that say that ChatGPT is better than doctors. Trust me, you are better than ChatGPT because you understand the context of the patient, and you intuitively have all of that stuff in your head when you see the patient. The example I use all the time.
Friendly research assistant is what I always say. Like, friendly, useful research assistant, not the same thing as a doctor.
Yeah. If you ask it for antibiotic recommendations for UTI, it's probably going to give you some pretty good answers. Probably the right answers. But if you forget to tell it that the patient's pregnant, or if you get to tell it the patient has CKD or has a sulfa allergy, it's not going to know that information, and it's going to and if you just gloss over it and just pick whatever ChatGPT says, obviously you're going to have problems and you can harm patients because you didn't give it enough context. That's it's kind of the point of the prompting. The last thing that I think it can be really helpful for case scenario generation, say you're working with a resident or a medical student, and you've got like a couple minutes to do some quick teaching, or you saw an interesting case recently, have it, you can tell it the diagnosis and then have ChatGPT come up with a fake patient case that you could then use for the med student or the resident to learn about from a particular case.
I mean, another thing that I'll say is, like, both of the 2 fake cases that we used here, I used Claude to say, like, hey, generate a fake transcript of a conversation between a doctor and a patient about testing. So these kind of, like, you can kind of, especially if you want to practice, again, do not use actual patient data in some of these things, but you can start to generate your own synthetic data essentially to play with and practice with.
Yeah. I see one more question. Sami Bahig is asking what software is reliable and trustable for prompting clinical information. Sami, at least in the United States, there's not really one that is trustable unless you or your organization has signed a business associates agreement, which is a HIPAA thing, for PHI to share PHI. So that's why I was kind of warning people, do not share PHI because that data will get vacuumed up. Even if you're using the API version of these tools, and OpenAI, Claude, they all say they will not use your data for training purposes, which is great. That still is a violation of HIPAA because you are sharing the information. Even if they say they're not going to use it, you're not allowed to share that information. Trustable is probably a different question entirely, and Matt and I could probably do an entire webinar on what's trustable. I think all the tools are impressively good, but they also have impressively large blind spots and like errors and hallucinations and holes that you can drive a Mack truck through. I
Use
think
it
that
for,
is.
I use the Wikipedia analogy, right? It's like there's like, oh, I remember learning this. I just kind of need to visually see it to prompt myself to be like, oh, that's right. That's what this is called, but that's the medical term for this. So
Yeah.
Trust yourself too. We all did a lot of training.
That's why we did so much medical training. Well, Matt, Kai, I want to thank you for the incredible hour together on prompting. Thank you, everybody, for questions and comments and prompts. We will send out our AI prompting workshop handout that will have the best prompts from the comments section, tools, the AI prompting references and resources from ChatGPT and Claude, and a ton of other resources that I personally learn from so that I can hopefully help and teach you all. So just wanted to say thank you for sticking around on this Wednesday evening. It's been absolutely a pleasure, and see you guys next time.
Thanks so much.